So I'm going to illustrate two of the kinds of questions we ask in the RedRover Readers program that really are, one of the foundational pieces to how this program works. So I'm going to ask you two types of questions that we use. And rather than just think of the answer to the question, I want you to really think about where you are in your brain when you had to think about how you would answer this question. So the first question is, who is Buddy? The name of this book is Buddy Unchained. Who is Buddy? Okay, so that's the first question, who is Buddy? The second question, take a look at this illustration here. How do you think Buddy feels in this picture? So this is an example of the second type of question we ask. How do you think Buddy feels in this picture? So again, think about where you are in your brain when you had to answer those two questions. How are they different? How are you accessing different parts of your brain? How is your thinking different when I ask those two questions? So when we do this workshop in person, typically people say in order to answer the first question, they didn't have to, it was quicker. They were able to answer the question fairly quickly. They were kind of at the top of their brain, the top of their head. They didn't have to think hard. They didn't have to, they had to do a little bit of analysis in terms of looking at the illustration, understanding the title, and pretty much quickly could say, oh, Buddy's the dog. So in that type of question, they're important because you do need to make sure kids understand what's happening in the story. So they need to know who the characters are and what's actually happening, the basic structure of the story and the plot and what's going on. And so those questions are important, but they're not deep questions. So you're at the front, your frontal lobe, you're doing some language analysis. So you're accessing the language centers of your brain. You're having to kind of cognitively comprehend what's going on. And people will tell us, there's a right answer. It's not like it has to be interpreted. People are going to come up with the same response, and there's one right answer. When I ask the second question, how do you think Buddy feels in this picture? Now, this is where people typically say, it took me longer. I felt emotional. So you're accessing your emotional part of your brain, which is in your amygdala. So that's a different part of your brain, a very older, primitive part of our brain that we carry around with us for a really long time. And so that's in the amygdala. You might be thinking about personal experiences where you've seen dogs like this. You might be imagining yourself in this situation, imagining how you feel of your own pet or dog that you've had in your different times of your life or in the situation. And it takes you longer to process, and there's not one right answer. It's an interpretive, it's affective. You're basically lighting up your whole brain in trying to answer this question. Now, you might not be aware of that, and that's a lot of what we work at with this program is bringing awareness to how you're thinking and where you're thinking in your brain. And there's been a lot of research on this. Lighting up the whole brain is not only great for learning, because you think about if you're going to change behavior or change attitudes, you really have to kind of change your brain. And by asking really deep questions and bringing awareness kind of how you're thinking and where you are in your thoughts, that awareness can help you almost restructure your brain or rethink of, change your attitudes and change your behaviors by bringing awareness to that thinking of why you think the way you do. And there's also research that this type of sort of integrating the brain, bringing awareness of those emotional responses to your frontal lobe. So connecting your emotional responses to your higher level thinking has actually been demonstrated to improve things like anxiety and depression. There's some really great evidence that a lot of our issues we have are linked to disconnection, that we're not fully integrating our brain, and we don't really know why we're having an emotional response. And so by this program, using these kinds of questions to bring self-awareness to children and awareness of others, not only benefits animals because people are going to be more aware of how they feel, and that empathy will help them, relate to them better, but it also is really helping the children learn better, learn deeper, and be more self-aware themselves to hopefully, prevent a lot of anxiety and depression if they continue this kind of deeper thinking. Think about what kind of learning would sink in deeper. What kind of things would help kids remember things better, or what kinds of questions would help change behaviors. This is really what we're trying to get at with the program, is by asking questions that really light up more of the brain, bring in people's personal narratives, their personal experiences, their affective, emotional responses to things. You're really changing the brain, and that's what it takes to change behavior and to change attitudes towards animals.